The reason why we've all travelled to be here today and what attracts us in these old boats. For many years I thought it was beauty, but to my mind it's something more. These boats have a story to tell of success, of glorious defeat, heroism, stupidity, romance, sadness, laughter. So for me, these boats, the stories of these boats take us back in time. They make us curious and trigger our imagination. And however passionately I love sailing, to me it's merely a part of the journey on board a time machine these old boats provide. So this is where I hope you'll allow me to go off script and grab the opportunity. There you go. And grab the opportunity to tell you a little bit about a boat named Ester. And to my mind, and this is the most significant restoration project on planet Earth today. It's not favoritism, I hope you agree with me in that. Back in back in 1901, Ester was built by Plym to a revolutionary design of Gunnar Mellgren. I will try to explain the significance by taking you back in time to a world in which he was created. When Mellgren made the design of this boat, we were in an age that no man had flown the skies. Mellgren actually finished this design of the boat shortly after, the Opera Tosca went into premiere in Rome. And Madame Butterfly, he didn't even start yet. That's how long ago it was. There you go. The boat was designed 2 years before the White brothers made their first flight. At the time that Ester was built, no man had visited the North or the South Pole. And despite 150 attempts, no one has been able to travel through the Northwest Passage. Many of the streets in those days were still paved with wood, and only the elite could afford a telephone. In short, the world was a completely different place. In that time and that world, Mellgren was commissioned by Mr. Hallin to design a boat named Ester. The design brief was simple: the fastest boat imaginable, a winner-take-all. There was no budget, and even that they were able to exceed. We know the story. But she was way ahead of her time, and she had elements in her that no one had dreamed of or seen before. If you look at the one button back in, there you go. If you look at the sections of Ester, she has a lot of aspects that we saw in the America's Cup boats in Valencia 100 years later. She had a plate keel, a spade rudder, which we've seen from people like Civic too. But her true extremists were in weight and weight distribution and innovations in that field. There you go. The boat, just to put it in perspective, the boat is 52 foot long, so 15.5 meter long, and she displaces 3.5 ton, of which 1.5 ton is in the keel. So there's a 15 meter boat that only weighs 2 tons. How do you achieve that? They started off with using rivets, which were all hollow, manually drilled out, a couple of thousand of them, and Bo actually told me they saved about 17 kilo of metal by just drilling holes into rivets and screws. The planking was to actually, the whole idea was to build her as light as possible, and going light means thin, but how do you retain stiffness? And one of the they didn't have the glue that they needed at that time to achieve that, so what they did is they made the planks extraordinarily wide. So what you see on a boat like Ester of that size, she only had 7 planks per side, and the widest one is the garboard plank, which was 600 mil, 60 centimeter wide, quarter saw mahogany. And then when it came to planking, what they did, what they did is they tapered the planking right at the keel. The plank is 16 millimeter thick, and it was tapered down to 10, 12 millimeter, at the covering board. So not only transverse, also in the length they tapered the planking, and right at the far ends the planking is only 11 millimeter thick and 16 in the middle. If you That's how you make a boat expensive, burn time. I think I'm not really sure where you are, Kim. Can you switch? I've lost my sequence. Can you split one back? Okay, yeah, sorry, go ahead. Now you can go forward. I've lost track of my slides, sorry. Anyway, here's just a few pictures of the boat. I'll stop where we are. One more. So this is, there you go. So this is inside the boat. What they did, and the only proper comparison I've seen was in the America's Cup of a hair shop, Reliance. And Reliance had this whole elaborate web structure inside the boat to bring stiffness in. But she was built, 3 years before Reliance. Quite extraordinary. It was one of the ways just to somehow get stiffness in that super light boat. What you can't see on the pictures here, but for instance, if you go to the rig, what happened is you took the shrouds went through the deck, and actually all the spanners, the bottle screws were below deck on a single rail, but of course the bottle screws, the tension shrouds were halved as well to save weight, and the screw thread was short. Yep, one more. That's Okay, we can go one more. There we go. In the end, Ester did what she had to do and what she was meant to do. She utterly dominated the racing scene in Sweden for about 30 years. I think in 30 years there's 1 or 2 races that she didn't win, but for the rest she just won whatever she entered. Amazing boat. Now we're going fast forward. In 1930 she sank, or in the 30s she sank and was lost, and that was the end of the boat. Bo Eriksson and Per Helgren were both fascinated by the boat and did research to try and find out the true story of it. They built a scale model, or Bo Eriksson, he built a scale model of the boat, and they were dreaming of building a full-scale replica at some point. And anyone around them, they would talk about Ester because that was, their total dream. Yeah, here's Bo's mini Ester. After about 20 years of talk, at some point, Bo runs into a fisherman and says, "I heard you're looking for this boat called Ester. I know where it is." And it turned out it was less than 2,000 meters away from where Bo lived. And it sank, and it sat there at 52-meter depth, 2,000 meters away from the house where he lived, which is quite extraordinary. Yeah, there you go. So, divers went down. Go ahead. There you go. So divers went down to see if Ester was still there, and this is a sonar image of Ester taken, and it sort of confirmed. You can see that she's sitting still with her rig up, actually upright in the sand, and she was sitting there since the mid-30s. So there was no choice; the boat had to be lifted. Go on. So divers went down, connected her up. See one? Here's Ester coming up. The interesting thing was that the salinity of the Baltic was such that the wood was really well preserved, and once, they kept her at that level, removed the mud and the sand and what have you, and they actually tried to float the boat, and it did. It doesn't have the structural integrity to go sailing, but she floated. That's something. So it tells you something about Mr. Plym too. So, all right. Here she comes out of the water. Yeah, go one more. Okay, just hang on. So okay, this is where the reconstruction started. The whole idea was just to see if she could be restored, but you'll see on the next picture it was basically one more king. And, there was what was metal was there to restore. What was extraordinary is that, because of the construction and the salinity of the water, the boat had retained her shape, so they could actually take measurements and see how the boat was built and learn from her. Theo Rai, a good friend who passed away a couple of years ago, went there as the first one to laser measure the boat, and he found that port to starboard there was less than 7 millimeter difference, and that's after 70 years at the bottom of the sea. It's quite extraordinary. So, but the decision was taken to rebuild her, and she had to be rebuilt the way she was, not using modern materials. And I think one of the philosophies there was where material use and shape go hand in hand. If Gunnar Mellgren, if he would have had epoxy and glass and Divinicel, he would have designed a TP52. He wouldn't have designed this thing. And this is, I think the beauty with Ester, what you see can go on. The beauty with Ester is that she, at least in my view, represents the ultimate of what you can do with a piece of wood. If you make it a little bit thinner, she would break. Yeah, that's it. And it goes for everything. Everything is built to the absolute limit. Okay, slide through. This is just Ester. This is probably 2-3 weeks ago. She will be sailing this summer. That's the plan, at least. Yeah, go on. That's it. Let's go with the team. So, but incredible project, and you for sure you'll hear more about it. And it's an absolutely fantastic project. And again, if you just see what the boat did, it's 120 years ago to actually build a 52-foot boat with 3.5 ton displacement and put 1.5 ton in the keel. That's quite something. And to actually not have it fall apart for 30 years, that's even more incredible.